Tell me something good. Any good news, anything, recent successes, anything positive happening in your real estate lives that we can share. Always have to start these classes with good mojo. Go ahead, Francis.
So I just got actually off the phone with David Perez. So I'm a brand new agent, and he actually just helped me set up. And tomorrow I'll be launching my first social media campaign.
Awesome. That's great.
Awesome.
Terrific. David is terrific. So get you all set up and kind of get you going.
Exactly.
Good stuff. Anybody else have something good going on?
I just came from a closing.
Who said that? Was that you, Sean?
Yes.
I thought that sounded like you. I had to find you on the screen. Congratulations. Good for you, brother.
Yeah, thank you.
You know, I shared the story at Ignite, I think, earlier today that I remember being at a closing one time a few years back, and one of the sellers or buyers said to the agents in the room, God, this is really tedious. This is really boring. Of all the things that you do in real estate, this must be something that you hate to do to go to these closings. And I said, no, actually, of all the things that we do, this is kind of the one that we like the most, right? Closings, if we could do closings regularly and consistently, we would be all in all the time. Congratulations on what did you close on?
A condo in Mawa.
And do you have the buyer or the seller?
I had the buyer on this one.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
And I had a closing last week on a listing I had.
Good for you. It sounds like it's been a good couple of weeks.
Yeah.
That's great.
Congratulations. Anybody else before we get moving right into our content tonight? That's some pretty good stuff. Some good mojo right there. I believe I was supposed to ask you guys a question, wasn't I? Who was here last week? Quick show of hands. Who was here last week? Not you, Leslie. You're driving. Back hands on the wheel, please.
I'm not driving, just so you know. I'm in the passenger seat.
Oh, you're in the passenger seat. Then you can put your hands up in the air. You can do the dance. It's all good. Patty Jalal had asked me to check in with you guys about something. Do you remember what I'm asking you about? Had to do with sharing your app. She taught you guys how to share an app last week, and we had some people make some commitments on sharing apps. How did we do with that?
To 20 people, right?
Yeah. How did we do?
Not so great.
How close do we get? Do we have
40%.
40%. Okay. You know, one of the things that is kind of the hallmark of productivity is just having a goal and checking in and seeing how we did. We're going to talk about that a little bit later today. So I'm going to encourage you guys still to try to get your app out into people's hands. What we know is that people are always curious about real estate. They constantly want to know. Now, they may not be looking to buy. They may not be looking to invest, but they're always curious. And anywhere in the United States or Canada, if they have your app in their hand, if they see a property for sale, they can just open it up. And because it's tied to the geographic location of your phone, it's going to hone right on into where they are. You're going to find out that information. I remember being on a walking tour of the Garden District in New Orleans years ago with my wife. And it was a Keller Williams event that we went down there. It was for family reunion, as I remember. And we're walking past Eli Manning's house and talking about how Archie would play out in the front yard with Eli and Peyton and toss the football around. And the guy was talking about homes in that neighborhood that were for sale. And I asked, how long did it take for you to learn all this stuff? And he pulled out his phone. God's honest truth. He pulled out his phone and he opened up a KW app and he says, I get all my information from this app. Now, he may have done that because Keller Williams was in town. I don't know. But it's great to get your app into people's hands because if they have questions about real estate, it's already branded to you. They just press the button. It sends you a text. It calls you. It sends you an email. That's what we want you to do. So keep getting that app out into people's hands, okay? The topic of the night tonight's topic is about goal planning, goal setting, and setting up your plan for success. How many of you recognize this good-looking guy here? With that quote that says, failing to plan is planning to fail. Did you ever hear that quote at any point in your life?
Yes.
Maybe from a middle school teacher or maybe from a high school teacher or maybe from mom and dad. It's just one of those sage pieces of wisdom, right? That if we don't have a plan, we're setting ourselves up not to do well, right? And here's one of the problems. Sometimes we have a plan. We think we know what we're going to do, but we go out about it in kind of a half-baked way. Do you see this slide here of what happens when you don't have a well-thought-out plan? That can be a real problem. I kind of sort of know what I want to do, so I'm just going to jump in and start doing something. But doing something without real clarity of purpose can lead you into, well, he's looking like he's going to have a nice little trip down to the ground there. When you have no plan, you can get yourself into some hot water. So let me share with you a story. I want to get into this tonight about sort of goal setting and setting up the right habits. And tomorrow we're going to give you some tools and some models to follow. But I want to share with you a story from my dad. And for those of you that have been in Ignite already, you've probably heard this story. But I'm going to tell it again because I like to tell it. And it's a story about when I was a kid. And my dad did have one of these sort of fatherly moments. He wanted to share some sage fatherly advice. And I don't remember exactly how old I was, probably young teen. And he pulled me aside and he said, look, I think you're old enough to know about some things. And I'm like, oh God, it's not this talk, is it, Dad? And he says, look, here's what I want you to know. There's some things I want you to know about how life works. And what I've come to learn in my lifetime is that you really don't have a whole lot of control over what happens. If you want to have a great career, you might, and you might not. If you want to have a great house to live in, it could happen, it might not happen. Great relationships, maybe yes, maybe no. Wealth and health, it's kind of up in the air. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, Dad, if this was supposed to be inspirational, you're kind of missing the mark here, because this is not really this uplifting fatherly talk that I was hoping I was going to get at some point from you. He says, no, hear me out. He says, the things that are up in the air are up in the air. The only thing you can control is the habits that you generate in your life. And your habits will decide your outcomes. If you want to have good health, you're going to have to develop the right diet and exercise habits. If you want financial wealth, you're going to have to develop the right financial habits. Relationships have to do a lot with communication habits. And he was really driving the point home that if you want to have a positive outcome, you really have to develop the right habits and let those habits carry the day. And I kind of stood back and I sort of said, okay, that was a pretty good recovery, Dad. You know, I'll give you that. I don't think I totally understood what he was aiming at and what he was trying to communicate with just how important habits are. We're going to talk about making sure that you put the right models in place so that you do the right things consistently over time so that you can have the outcome that you want. But I lead with that story tonight because I really want you to understand that part of having success in your life is knowing where you're going and having clarity of where you're going and why. And we're going to talk about figuring that out tonight. But the other part of success is the consistent application of effort, time on task over time, until it becomes habitually, routinely the thing that you do day in and day out, whether it's raining, whether it's snowing, whether the sun is shining, you're doing the same things because that's just what you do. And when you develop that kind of a rhythm in your real estate business or anything, that's really where success happens. So Gary Keller and Jay Papasan wrote this book a number of years ago called The One Thing. Anybody familiar with The One Thing? Have a copy of the book, The One Thing? If you don't have a copy of it, you know, I'd encourage you to get it and take a read on it. I don't get paid to hawk Gary Keller's book, so I'm not in his downline. I don't get any kind of kickbacks on royalties. But what I will tell you about The One Thing is it is one of the simplest reads out there. You can probably knock it out in about 2 hours. It's been on the Wall Street Journal's #1 best-selling business book for years and years and years. And it really starts to kind of talk about some of the just simple truths that separate people who perform and achieve at a high level from folks who don't. And one of the things that they talk about in The One Thing is who we are and where we want to go determines what we do and what we accomplish in our lives. Kind of gets back to that notion of habits, who we are and where we want to go, where our vision is, ultimately determines what we do and what we can accomplish. And I think to some degree, who we are is part of that in terms of, you know, what values and beliefs, what limiting beliefs do I have that could stand in the way of where I am and where I want to get to in my real estate career? I hear this from folks who are dual career all the time. People tell me that I can't be successful if I'm part-time in real estate. People tell me I can't be successful if I have this job and another job. And I'm going to tell you, I don't buy that for a minute. We've never been a company who has said, if you have another job, you're not welcome here. I have seen those companies. I know who those companies are who only hire an agent if they're quote unquote full time. And yet what I've seen through almost 2 decades of doing this work is some of the most successful people are the ones who do have another commitment outside of the real estate life. But they've learned how to incorporate their real estate goals and their real estate dreams around the edges of that other career.
Mm-hmm.
Dual career and part-time are entirely different. Career builders, this course that we're putting here right now, is for dual career agents. And it's also for anybody who wants to just come and to learn this content. But we wrote this for folks who are dual career because we know that dual career is a mindset. It's I'm all in on one area. Maybe I've got another job that pays the bills and pays the health insurance and I can't really leave that. Maybe my other commitment is I'm a full-time parent. Maybe my other commitment is I've got older parents who depend upon me to care for them during the day. There's lots of things that can pull away our time. But dual career is the mindset that says when I'm in real estate, I'm giving it 100%, right? It's not 50-50, right? Having success in real estate and having success in something else is not 50-50. It's like a marriage. Either both people are in 100% or you've got problems. A great marriage is never a 50-50 endeavor. And marrying your real estate career to your other career, it's all in, right? And here's the thing that Gary and Jay say, who we are and where we want to go determines what we do and what we accomplish. So the first question is, where do I want to go? This is a session tonight about goal setting and how do we figure out how to set the right goals. Tomorrow, Patty will bring you through the models of how do you execute the plan. But there's another book, and again, I don't get paid to hawk Gary's books, but this is The Millionaire Real Estate Agent. And how many of you have a copy of this one? If you don't, you could actually get this online for free. I think there's a free download of this book online if you want to. I think there's a version of it on YouTube or something. But the book starts with the story of the shepherd and the wolf. Has anybody read the book and remember that story of the father and the son who are shepherds? Does anybody remember the story in the parable? That can unmute and tell us a little bit about it? If not, I'll share it with you if you haven't read it. It opens up with a father and son who are shepherds and they're tending the flock at night when the wolf comes. And the wolf comes and the father kind of uses this as a moment of teaching for his son. And he says to his son, look, one of the things that we have to do is we have to protect the flock, and you've got the gun. You are here in the moment. What you have to understand is at night when things are dark and the wolf is off in the distance and your emotions are running, your adrenaline is running, there's a tendency to aim just a little bit too low. He says, look, I've been doing this. I want you to understand how this works. Trust me, if you aim just a little bit higher than where you think you need to aim to hit the wolf, you will in fact hit the wolf, because in the chaos of the night, you're going to miss, and you're going to miss low. So the son raises his sights. He takes his dad's advice. He shoots and he hits the wolf, and the flock is saved. And the parable of the story is sort of the moral of the story here in this parable is we've got to aim high. We've got to aim high in order to create the life that we want, right? I ask agents all the time when they're thinking about their real estate career, I ask them to quantify a dollar figure for how much money are you looking to make? Because I can tell you as a coach and as a trainer, there's a different path to get to a different number. I've coached agents who've come to me and said, look, I don't need or want or desire to make a lot of money in real estate. I'm doing this to create an income stream to take care of this one particular need. Maybe it's a vacation. Maybe it's something special for the family. And I have had other people who've come to me and said, as a coach, look, this is my everything. And I need to be coached into a 7-figure income. And look, there's a different pathway because I've coached people to both numbers. It's a different pathway to get to $20,000 than it is to get to $1 million. But there is a pathway. There is a known route. The shepherd and the wolf starts with the idea that we want to aim high. And the question that I ask people all the time is, what are you playing for? How much are you playing for? We've got to have a precise number. All too often when I ask people, how much do you want to make in real estate? What's your goal? I hear people say, I want to have success and I want to make a lot of money. Anybody feel that way? Quick show of hands. How many people want to be successful in real estate? How many people would like to make a lot of money in real estate? Okay. It's not an IQ test, but I think it's a question that most of us could probably answer in the affirmative. We want to be successful at this. This is why we're putting the time in at 6:00 at night on a Monday. And I love that answer, but I tell people all the time, the problem with that answer is it's not precise enough, because I don't know what successful and making a lot of money means to you. For some people, success and a lot of money is $50,000. For some people, it's $500,000. We always ask people to put a dollar figure to your goal setting. And we're going to back into how to think about that tonight, because without the precision of knowing the exact target, we won't be able to really calculate the correct route. And if we don't have the right route, we'll never be able to keep ourselves on the right course. How many of you guys have a GPS in your car, or maybe now on your phone? I use Waze for everything. Anybody have a GPS?
Mm-hmm.
Do you like having the security of having that GPS?
Yes.
What do you like about it, Cindy?
Oh, it's great. It gets me where I'm going in the quickest way possible.
Well, it tells you how to get there. You've got to get there yourself, but it gives you the right route, doesn't it? Here's what I love about a GPS. If you have a GPS, you're never really lost, right?
Right.
I mean, sometimes you can wander into uncharted territory. I remember one time my wife and my daughter were driving back in the days of the Garmin GPSs on the dashboard, and they drove into a military complex, a military base. And suddenly she said the GPS went blank. All the roads were gone. And she didn't really know where she was anymore. And she was driving along, and all of a sudden she comes to a guard tower or a guard booth, and the guy comes out and he's got his M16 with him as he steps out, and he says to her, she says to him, "I'm lost. I don't know where I am." He says, "I know. We've been following you now for 3 miles." Right? What happens is, as long as you have a GPS and you don't go into restricted space, you always have the ability to kind of recalculate, right? And that's the message. Right? Because here's the beauty. We can put a precise target into the GPS. People have lived before us and left maps, and we've got a tracking system in the satellites that know where we are at any given moment. It says, go here, go here, go here. And if we make a wrong turn, what does it tell us?
Recalculate.
It says recalculating. There's no judgment about that. It doesn't say, God, you're an idiot. I can't believe you missed that turn. I mean, I've been talking to you for 3 miles to get right. Are you kidding me? What did you think I meant? Eat oatmeal? I said, get right. I meant change lives. It's not programmed to insult you or embarrass you. It just says, look, you're off track. Let's get you on the right course, right? We're going to teach you a tool tomorrow night called the GPS that helps you think about how do you get on the right course for your business. And instead of GPS standing for Global Position Satellite, it stands for Goals, Priorities, and Strategies. Once you know where you're going financially or where you're trying to get to in terms of your income, tomorrow night, Patty's going to walk you through the process of having to figure out, how do I prioritize my actions into the right strategies and the right activities that are going to help me really get me where I want to be. But we want you to aim high, because aiming low doesn't get you anywhere, right? Here's the reason why we ask people to think and act and achieve in big outcomes. Because big dreams require you to take big action steps. If you want to run a marathon, you're not going to train the same way as if you're trying to train to run a 5K, right? You're going to train differently. And if you've got a big goal, the things that you have to do to achieve that big goal will be proportionately larger than the things that you would need to achieve achieve a small goal. And as a result, the trajectory of your approach is going to be wildly different. Big outcomes require big action and big thinking and big steps. Small outcomes require smaller thinking and smaller actions. The big question is, how big is your box? How big is the box that you are setting yourself up in terms of real estate success? How big is the vision? And this is not a judgment about what it should be, but the question is it big enough for you to achieve the life that you want? That's the big goal, right? So how do we think about that? What is your vision? One of the things that we talk about in this company all the time is your big why. What is your big why? Has anybody heard that phrase and can unmute and talk to me a little bit about what are we talking about when we say, what is your big why? I'd love to have we've got 21 people in the room. I'd love to hear somebody unmute and talk about Big Y for a second. You're going to make me call on somebody like a school teacher? I don't want to do that.
Why you're doing something, no matter what it is.
What's the driver, right? What are you trying to achieve? What are you playing for? That's the question. What are you playing for, right? Because here's the reality. In order to be successful in real estate, you're going to have to do things that you've never done. And in order to do things that I've never done, that's going to create a certain amount of discomfort for us.
Mhm.
And human nature is to always not want to be uncomfortable. We want to go back to the things that we know. We want to go back to the things that are comfortable. And one of the things that's really critical is to be real clear on what it is that you're playing for and why. If you've ever read a book or watched a movie of someone lost in the wilderness who's been rescued after weeks and weeks lost, right? You think about Tom Hanks with his volleyball friend or whatever it is. But what you find is that people who survive and endure that, generally speaking, are hanging on because there's someone back home who's depending on them. You know, a big dream, a big why that is framed in being of service to other people, oftentimes is much more compelling. We will give up on our own dreams, but we'll be damned if we're going to give up on our kids' dreams or someone else who's dependent upon us. And so one of the things that we start to think about is, okay, what am I playing for? If I woke up tomorrow morning and everything was exactly the way that I wanted it to be, that I had the perfect real estate life, that I had the perfect life in general, that I had all the financial freedom in the world, I could go where I want, I could do what I want, I could fund all the things that were meaningful to me, how much money does that take? And how important is that? Because in the moment when you're torn between doing the thing that you would rather not do, which is probably going to be generating leads, it's going to be working on your real estate business after a long day at work when you're coming home and you're tired, and you know you probably should do some lead generation, but you just don't feel like it, then we need to kind of be able to kind of reach back into our hip pocket and say, hey, what am I playing for? What am I doing this for? If it's for me, it's really easy to bail out and say, well, I can just put it aside for another day. If our big why is for someone else, we're going to be pushing ourselves to do the thing we'd rather not do. I can share with you my own story that when I first got into real estate, I had two big driving forces. One was I promised my daughter, who at that time was in second grade, that any college that she could get into that I would pay for it full freight, that she would not have to take out a student loan. I would cover the entire thing. Now, I probably should have checked out the cost of college before I put myself out there like that, because that is a really big nut. And thank God I only had one child. But the once that was out there, she's like, okay, Dad, I'm going to do my part if you do yours. There were plenty of times when I didn't really feel like doing the open house, when I didn't really feel like making those lead generation calls. I didn't really feel like making those follow-up calls. And I just had to kind of answer myself, am I willing to tell her that I lied? When it finally comes to college and she gets accepted and I have to tell her, you know what, turns out that you are going to have to take out a student loan after all because I didn't really plan well enough. Am I willing to have that conversation with her? The answer was no. I think for a lot of us, if we're really going to have success in setting the right goals, not only do we have to have clarity on what does it take, but we sure as heck have to have clarity on what am I playing for? Because just having this fantasy dream of success is never enough. It's always the what am I playing for that carries the day. So here's an exercise that I'd love for us to do. This is an exercise that I call my big life, right? Sort of the precursor to my big fat Greek life. You might have seen the movie. What I want you to do is I want you to look at this screen. Every one of these boxes here represents a person in your life or an organization that you care about. And what I'd like for you to do is just take a minute. If you have a sheet of paper, it would be easier if you could actually write this down. If you had a piece of paper, to just take notes and start to write down some of the names. Who are some of the people that you care for that you would want to be supportive of? What are some of the organizations that you believe in that you would want to be supportive of? And just write a couple of names down. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds just to do that much. Who are the people and the organizations that you care about and would like to make a positive impact for? Now, once you've got a couple of those names written down, I know that was only 15 seconds, but in the interest of time, once you've gotten a couple names written down, what I want you to think about is, what is it that you'd actually want to do for them? For my daughter, it was to pay for her college so that she didn't have to worry about taking out student debt. For my parents, which was also another big why, it was to give them the peace of mind that even though they never earned a lot of money in their lifetimes because of career choices that they made and whatever, we were always happy and well fed as kids. I didn't realize that we didn't have any money until I started to need money. You know, one of the big whys for me is I wanted my mom and dad to know that as they got older, that they didn't have to worry. That if they didn't have enough money for their own health needs, if they didn't have enough money to take care of themselves, that I would be able to do that for them. And so what I would want you to think about is, once you've identified the people that, or the organizations that are important to you, I want you to think about what would you want to do for them. And take a minute and think about that. Is anybody willing to kind of share maybe one or two that they've come up with for themselves, something that is meaningful to you that would be worth playing for?
I'm involved with a domestic abuse agency.
Okay. And what would you want to do for that organization, Cindy?
My plan this spring is to sponsor an event.
Okay.
They're having a Mother's Day tea, and I want to give them money to sponsor that.
I love that. Good for you. That's a wonderful one. Anybody else have one that they would want to share? One more. Nobody? All right. That's all right. But here's what I do want you to do. Go ahead.
I want to pay all my debt.
You want to pay off all your debt. Is that what you're saying, Nellie?
Yes, and also help my nephews go to college.
Awesome. Pay off my existing debt, help my nephews go to college to help make a better life for themselves. Now, that's the agenda, right? That's what we're thinking about. Who are we playing for and what do we want to do for them? Now, here comes the $64,000 question. I want you to put a dollar figure on what that would actually take. And I'm not going to ask people to give those numbers. Nellie, I don't want to know on an open Zoom mic how much it takes to get out of debt. I have an idea what it costs to send nephews, more than one, to college. But I want you to put a dollar figure on what do you think it would require for you to do those things. And as you go through this exercise, and you can kind of think about this outside of this Zoom meeting tonight, and I would encourage you to get the people who matter in your world involved with it as well. If you've got a partner who you're not just playing, the real estate game for, but somebody who also has a vested interest in your real estate success, let's talk to them too and sort of say, hey, how much does it take? What are we trying to accomplish as a family, as a couple, if that's relevant? But if you look at the slide here, what we've done here is we've identified the topic. We've identified the dollar figure that it takes to do this in this particular exercise. Someone wanted to donate $5,000 to donate to the cat habitat at the Domestic Pets Alive organization. It was a $5,000 donation. They wanted to send Sarah and Hunter through school debt-free. That was $120,000. Clearly, that was in college. Right? Mom and dad pay off their mortgage, $18,000. You roll all of that up into a central number in the middle, and that becomes the number that our real estate business needs to generate in order to achieve the life that we want. When I ask people how much money you're trying to create in your life, I usually get a lot of money, and that's great. I ask people to make more specific decisions. The second most common answer I hear all the time is $100,000. And I ask them all the time, is $100,000 really the right answer? Does $100,000 really fund the things that you need to have funded? Now, I will tell you, if you've got another source of income, if you do have another career, or you've got a partner who brings income in, or you've got other investments or other sources of income stream, it doesn't all have to come from real estate, but we do need to be clear on how much of it does. Because the reason why we do this and the reason why we start a business is to fund our life. The purpose of business is to generate profit. Make no mistake. Businesses that are not profitable do not stay alive. I come from the nonprofit sector. I've got a degree in nonprofit management. I got to tell you something. Nonprofits have to be profitable.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference is they don't distribute it to their shareholders. They use that towards the mission of the organization, but nonprofits have to be profitable. Any business that's not profitable is a business that's not worth owning, right? What we say all the time at Keller Williams is what we want to try to accomplish is we want to help people do a couple key things. Number one, have a career worth having, a business worth owning, and a life worth living, right? When you think about a career worth having, what does that mean? That means something that you enjoy, something that you look forward to. Has anybody ever had a career they didn't like? Quick show of hands. Anybody have a job they hated? I may be the only guy apparently then, because I can tell you, I know what it's like on Sunday night to have that sense of doom. Oh my God, it's coming. Here comes Monday. It's like you hear the 60 Minutes TV show, the clock starts ticking, tick, 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 and you can start to feel the dread come. Oh my God, it's coming. I got to go back to work tomorrow. That's not.
I liked my job, but I definitely had that feeling every Sunday night. No doubt.
A sense of doom. Here it is. I got to get back into the pressure cooker, right? Careers worth having are careers that you enjoy, that you wake up with excitement, that you just can't wait to get after it. A business worth owning is a business that's generating profit, period, full stop, end of sentence. If a business is not profitable, it should stop so that you can re-energize yourself into something that creates profit. The purpose of business is to create profit so that you can fund this, your life. Right? And so the first part of tonight, the first half of tonight is really thinking about how do I wrap my arms around this? Because I know that I want to be successful, but what does success look like? Success looks like having the financial ability to fund the things that matter. That's what success looks like. That's not necessarily financial freedom, by the way. Financial freedom is something completely different. Financial freedom is being able to fund the things that matter through passive income streams so that whether I go to work or I don't go to work, those things are going to be taken care of. Passive income streams can come from lots of different sources. They can come from things like investments that I have, properties that I own, right? But success, the way we're going to define it here, is being clear on what does it take? What are you trying to accomplish? How many dollars does it take to do that? And once I know that, then I know what I'm aiming for. Any questions around thinking about that this way? Does everybody have a clear financial target to what they want to achieve in their business? I suspect probably not yet. Quick show of hands. Anybody have this number already mapped out for themselves? Okay. If not, Francis, you've got one. Good for you. Good for you. For the rest of us, if we don't have one, it's really time to start thinking about that. Because where we're going to go next is, unless we're clear where we're going, we have no idea what the route is going to be, right? So how much does it cost to fund that big life? You've got to have the right target in place. And what does that target include? It not only includes your monthly expenses, right? Your car payment, your mortgage payment, your food bills, whatever it is. It's not just your monthly expenses. I've got to make enough to cover that. But I've also got to make enough to fund any future goals and future dreams that I have. I want to send my kid to college. I want to be able to pay for a wedding. I want to be able to help my mom with assisted living care if that comes into her future at some point. It's not just what do I need now. It's a big enough income source that I can plan for the future. Oh, and by the way, we also have to plan to be able to carry the premiums on the insurances that protect us if things go off the rails. We think about things like, do I have the right kind of health insurance? And note to self, guys, whether you're employed or you're not employed in a place that's providing health insurance, it's damn expensive. Can we agree that that's true?
Mm-hmm.
It is ridiculously expensive. And if you're in real estate as your full-time and you don't have a health insurance policy, you are completely on the hook for providing that. And so I've got to make sure that I'm not just earning enough to pay my monthly expenses and maybe put some aside for college. Whoop, I'm going to do a little muting here because a little background noise. We got to make sure that we're also putting enough aside to pay for the insurance premiums if something went wrong, the life insurance premium if something went wrong, or God forbid, the disability premiums as I get older and something happens to me and I lose the ability to go to work. Is my income going to be protected? You know, one of the things that we've got to really be clear about is it's one thing to create sort of wealth and financial success, but we've got to be earning enough to make sure that we're protecting it as well. And there are no protections in real estate unless we put them in ourselves through the insurance premiums, right? So when we're thinking about these financial targets, all of those things get rolled in, right? All those things get rolled in to how much money do I have to generate to make this all work? And here's an unfortunate hard truth, guys. You're in real estate, you don't get to keep all the money. You know, unfortunately, you got to share that money with other people, right? Every single dollar that comes in after a closing, right? And who was it that said that they had a closing today? It was Sean. I knew that was Sean. And one last week, right? Terrific. You don't have to keep all that money, Sean, do you? Who gets parts
No,
of
I
it?
don't.
Yeah, not even close, right?
No. Yeah.
Who has dibs on that money?
The brokerage, the office.
Yeah, right. The office. In fact, if you take a look at a commission dollar here, right? Every commission dollar that comes that's paid in a real estate transaction is actually probably split between two agents, not just one, right? The listing agent gets a cut, the buyer side agent gets a cut, and then you take your half, and some of that's going to go to the market center. Right now, we work in a model at Keller Williams where we know what that to the market center is going to look like. It's a predictable number. It's 30%, right? It's 30% of every transaction with an annual cap. Are we all clear on how that works? Every commission dollar that comes in, market center is going to get 30% of it until we reach the maximum cap. And in most of our Bergen County market centers, that cap is $37,000, right? A certain amount of money is going to go to Keller Williams International. Does anybody know how much the royalty fee is?
6%.
6% of every transaction with an annual cap of what? Do you know where that one caps, Leslie?
With an annual cap of 37,000.
Nope, that's your company
Oh,
dollar
sorry,
cap.
3,000.
3,000. And what does that pay for, that $3,000? Do you have any idea? If you're giving $3,000 a year to Keller Williams International, you ought to know what it's paying for.
It's paid for the coaching. Is it the coaching?
No, certainly not
That's
the coaching. It's definitely not the
10%.
trainer. I can promise you that. That comes out of the company. That's an overhead expense in the market centers, right? The royalty is part of a big international franchise, provides for sort of the back office systems that allow franchises to work. The things like, the legal departments and the technology. For sure, a lot of it is the technology. Gary Keller has committed $1 billion over 5 years to build out Command. And we are not a publicly traded company that can just go sell stocks. The only revenue that we can put into Command comes from the company dollar. It comes from the royalty fees on agents' transactions. It's one of the reasons why we have to be as big as we are, right? We can't fund $1 billion project if we only have 150 agents, right? So what we know is half of that commission dollar goes to the other agent. Part of it goes to your market center. Part of that goes to your operational overhead and your business expenses. Part of that should be budgeted to pay Uncle Sam. Oh, and by the way, right, we've got to remember to budget to pay those tax bills. And at the end of the day, you don't really get as much at the closing table to put into your pocket after all expenses are paid as we like to think we do. Here's a quick back of the envelope rule of thumb. For every dollar that you earn, here's what the Millionaire Real Estate Agent model tells us. 30% should be budgeted right out of the gate to pay for your brokerage. 30% should be budgeted right out of the gate to cover all your operational overhead. And 40% should be what you bring to your bottom line. Before taxes, right? And so one of the things that we start to think about is if I'm trying to fund all of those things that matter to me, donating to that charity, paying for that kid's school, paying for whatever it is that matters to me, I can only pay for those things with profit. I can't pay for those things with money that I have to allocate to the IRS. I can't pay for those things with money that I have to give to the brokerage. I've got to make sure that when I'm building out my goals, that I'm building them big enough that after I've shared it with the brokerage, after I've split it with the other agent, after I've paid the royalty and the operational overhead and the taxes, that I still have enough to do the things that I need to do. One of the biggest challenges sometimes that we have is we don't really account for that reality. And we don't create a target that's really big enough, right? Just as a sidebar, it's tax season right now. And I'm going to ask you to talk to your tax professionals about how much money you should be putting aside for your taxes, for your real estate business. The default that we go to in the company is 40% of your 40% of your taxable income should be allocated towards your taxes. And a lot of people say 40%, that just sounds so big. And the truth is, it is a big number, and it may be too big for you. Your tax professional is going to tell you whether it's 40 for you, or would 30 be better, or maybe even 20. But the thing that we have to account for is, as an independent contractor, we're responsible for paying our state taxes. We're responsible for paying our federal taxes. And then we've got this other pesky little thing as an independent contractor that we call self-employment tax. And what does self-employment tax pay for? Well, it pays for things like my Social Security when I retire, my Medicare when I retire. Those are contributed to through payroll. And when we work for another company, the payroll administrator and the company pay a big chunk of that. But if you don't work for a company, you're going to be on the hook for that expense yourself. And by the way, the self-employment tax in New Jersey, does anybody know what that number is? What percentage? 15.6. So on top of what you're putting aside for the IRS, on top of what you're putting aside for the state of New Jersey, budget another 15.6% for your self-employment tax. And guys, one of the things that agents say to me all the time is, are you kidding me? Is there going to be anything left for me? There will be. One of the things that you're going to find is that the amount that's left over is the margin on profit for a self-employed realtor when you compare it to virtually any other kind of business that you could be in. The percentage of the dollar that gets back to your pocket is massive compared to other business endeavors. If you look at another franchise model like a McDonald's, has anybody ever owned that kind of a franchise restaurant chain? I haven't either. But what I can tell you is this: the McDonald's owners that I have talked to have told me that on every dollar that they sell at McDonald's, if they could keep 7 or 8 cents to their bottom line, they would be thrilled. Guys, for us, we're closer to 35 to 40 cents. And after taxes, probably closer to 20 cents, 25 cents. And people say that's not enough. Well, the difference is we've got to make it up in volume. What's different about a McDonald's model is you can go into McDonald's parking lot, point to a sign with golden arches on it, and see a sign that says billions and billions of people have been served here. And if you're making 7 cents on a dollar times billions and billions, that turns into real money real fast. For us, if we're keeping a smaller percentage of profit after all expenses and taxes, we just have to ask, are we doing enough units so that that number is able to fund my life? Right? Does it make sense? I want to make sure you guys are all with me on the logic of how we're going after this. Tomorrow, we're going to get into the models of setting these goals. Tonight, we're sort of setting up the mindset for success. And here's what we do. We start to think about, okay, well, how much do I get paid on an average commission? And your mileage may vary. It depends on what market you work in. But if we were to assume a good, solid Bergen County number, and even a conservative one of $400,000. Does anybody know what the median sale price is in Bergen County right now? It's probably in the high fours. Ron, do you know what that is? Probably like 470, 480. Actually, in the past year where homes have appreciated, it's probably creeping up to 500,000, which is really sick when you think about it, that the median price up here is $500,000. The median price in the state of New Jersey is about 3.25. The median price in the United States is about 285. So to have a sale price that's almost double what the average in the United States is a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because you don't have to sell as many houses to make the same amount of money. It's a curse because that makes this market very competitive with agents who all want a piece of that pie. But if the average price of a home is $400,000, let's be conservative. If we were to conservatively say that the commission on a single side, buyer side or seller side, is 2.5%, then 2.5% of 400,000 is 10 grand. I picked 400,000 because at 6:45 at night, the math gets really easy. If I picked a tough number like 480, which is probably the median, I'd have to get my calculator out, and I'm just not up to it right now, right? Then what we do is we say, okay, if my cap in my market center is $37,000 a year and my franchise royalty is $3,000 a year, I know that I'm on the hook for $40,000 a year maximum to the company. And so we go back and we start to say, okay, how much profit, net income, do I need after expenses to pay for the things that I want? We start working back into our GCI by trying to figure out what's the profit that I need to earn after expenses so that I can fund the things that matter to me. And then we add those other things back in. If I needed $100,000 to fund all the dreams that I had per year, then I add back in, I know I'm going to have $40,000 between the company dollar and the royalty. Now I have to earn $140,000. And if I had business expenses of maybe $50,000, now I have to earn $190,000. And if my average commission is $10,000 each, then I know that in order to make this work, I need to have 19 closings. Do you see how this math works? Guys, we have to be able to do this calculation for ourselves because at the end of the day, we need to know not just how many dollars do we need to close. We need to know how many units we need to close to make those dollars real. Because when we start, and tomorrow Patty will start walking you through the GPS, what specific goals, what specific priorities, what specific actions are going to be important. In order to make it all come together, we need to know how many units do we need to close. Because we have to do a different number of actions if I have a bigger number of units, right? That makes sense. Guys, what questions do you have about what I'm saying up until this point? I want to make sure everybody's with me before I change gears for the last 10 minutes or so. This is kind of back of the envelope math right here. But what we're making sure of is that we start with the concept that my gross commission dollars don't mean anything because I don't get to keep all those. I need to think profit dollars, add in all those other expenses to figure out what's the gross commission I need, and then divide that by my average closing commission to figure out how many units I need, right? That's what the model suggests. Now, you can go into Command, and Command gives you the opportunity to go in and put all of that into your goal setting for the year, and it will set up a dashboard for you. Every time that you log in, it will tell you, how much of that commission income are you allocated to earn this month and how close are you to it? How much did you earn this month? It's going to constantly be helping you stay focused because we know that those things that are in front of us, we pay attention to, we give our energy to. But Command will help you stay on track. I'd encourage you to go and put your goals into Command once you've figured out what those are. What am I playing for? Why is it important? How much does it cost to fund all of that? That's the profit number I need to hit. Back in all those other expenses to figure out the gross number that I need to hit, and then plug those into Command so that we can see how our actual is stacking up onto where we are. And that starts to function like that GPS. Are you on track or are you off track? If I'm off track, what do I need to do to get back on track again? What levers do I need to push? What actions do I need to take? And again, tomorrow, Patty will walk you through the GPS tool. But we've got to keep focused. We've got to keep focused and remind ourselves, why are we doing the things that we're doing? And recognize that we have to build momentum. And the recipe for momentum is this: consistent time on task over time is how we build momentum, right? It's through repetition, doing these things again and again and again until they become what? Until they become that habit that we talked about earlier. My dad didn't know a lot of things, but he did know a lot of things. And one of the things that he was really clear on is that your habits create your future. And choose wisely. The things, the activities that we focus on again and again and again become those habits. Are we choosing the right ones? Here's a little affirmation that you can start to use to kind of help keep yourself on track. We start to think about what it is that I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And we start to write it into a little statement that we can keep by our computers, keep in our wallet to look at when we need that little bit of a reminder. And it starts like this. Here's the formula. I'm doing this business activity to provide for support for the person or cause by describing what your money will do or allow them to do, because I want to, and then state why you want to invest in the person. It sounds a little bit like this. I'm making this call right now in this moment to provide for my parents by paying off their house because they supported and provided for me, and I want to enable them to retire with confidence. That's kind of how we operationalize this, by thinking about what's important, what we're playing for, and putting it into a little statement that just helps us stay on track, right? I'd encourage you to take a little time and think about doing this, right? I'd encourage you to do that. And again, we are recording these. So if you want to go back and see this formula again, just go into the YouTube channel. It should be up there in a few days. But success leaves clues. Last 5 minutes. Anybody recognize this guy? Who is this guy?
Tony Robbins.
Tony Robbins, the great Tony Robbins, right? One of the great personal training gurus of all time. And what Tony says is, look, success leaves clues. We don't have to figure everything out. People have lived before us. All we need to do is to become better modelers and to choose the right models, because success does leave clues. And here's what success teaches us. The clues are this: we need focus and we need accountability. What am I going to focus on? How am I going to hold myself accountable? That's the recipe for performance success. When we think about focus, we think about the 80-20 rule or the Pareto principle. Anybody familiar with that concept and what it says? Go ahead, Francis. Talk to us about the Pareto principle.
It's pretty broad, but the general thing is that 20% of any one thing accounts for 80% of like your profitability or your effort. So it's the same thing. Like you can go into a Target and only 20% of the products account for 80% of their profit.
Yeah.
And no matter what you do in life, everything always balances roughly back out to 80-20.
It's a fascinating, I don't know if it rises to the level of a law of nature, but it's a fascinating distribution that's consistently true. And it was first identified early on by an Italian economist named Pareto, who was studying the distribution of wealth in Italy. And what he found was 20% of the folks controlled 80% of the resources in Italy in the 1800s. The fascinating thing is he's also a gardener. And what he noticed was that 20% of the pea pods at harvest time also delivered 80% of the crop yield. And he started to see this pattern showing up again and again and again, 80-20, 80-20, 80-20. And Francis, you can carry that right into business today, because it is true that 20% of their products are going to generate 80% of the revenues. 20% of the repeat customers are going to generate 80% of the revenue. Don't think that was lost on Amazon when they decided to create the Amazon Prime. I could go into your laptop today and download all of the data on your hard disk. And what you will find is 80% of the data will be contained in 20% of the individual files. You can take it to the bank. There's a branch of science called chaos theory that explains why that's true on your computer, which is way above my scientific pay grade. But what we know in performance is not everything that we do yields the same outcome. Some things we do get us a lot of success. Most of what we do doesn't really get us too far. We have to be clear on what are the things that we can do that are going to move the needle the farthest. And guys, if we have a dual career lifestyle and we have other pressures on our times, we have to be ruthlessly clear about this, because we don't have time that we can squander. Somebody who's doing this as their only source of income, if they kind of blow an afternoon and they blow 4 hours, maybe they can pick it up and recover it. But if you are dual career and you've got other pressures on your time and limited hours to spend in your real estate life, you have got to be ultra clear on what am I going to do with these hours and why. That's what the Pareto principle, that's what the 80-20 rule says. 80% of our outcome is generated by 20% of our efforts. Be clear and choose wisely. And recognize that we get distracted. Human beings are naturally distractible. That's the nature of the beast. And we live in an extraordinarily distracting world. And one of the things that, whether we like it or not, is just another thing that just seems to show up true, is that the things that are screaming the loudest and demanding our time, that seem so urgent in the moment, are rarely the things that are really that big deal in the big picture. Right now, I've got a little cat that wants to get out of this office. He's going to start screaming in a moment, and that is going to seem pretty urgent, especially if he decides he wants to jump on the table. I may need to walk away, but that's not the most important thing right now. Talking to you guys is we get drawn into the things that scream loud all the time. And one of the habits that we've got to get into, and again, back to that word of habit, is being clear on what are the things that are going to have the most impact on my success, and doing those only. The book, The One Thing, has something that we call the Pareto principle on steroids. You take that 20% that we know, if I do these 20% of these activities right here, these are the things that are going to lead to my success the most. What would be the 20% of that? That's called going hyper Pareto, right? What's the 20% of the 20%? And what's the 20% of that? And drilling it all down to this one focusing question would simply ask, okay, let's just get it down to this one question. What's the one thing that I could do right now? What's the one thing that I could do right now that if I did it would make everything else easier or unnecessary? That's the focusing question. When I get home from work and I have time to dedicate to my business, what's the one thing that I could do such that if I did it, everything else would be easier or unnecessary? And to dissect that question just a little bit, it's what's the one thing that I can do? It's not what's the one thing that somebody else can do. The things that you can do are the things that come out of your skill set, that come out of your talent, that come out of what you're competent in. We say all the time, and I teach this all the time in the classes, I just reiterate it again and again like a mantra. If you want to be successful, you're going to have to step outside of your comfort zone a little bit. You're going to have to stretch outside of your comfort zone a little bit. But if you want to be successful, you better not stretch outside of your skill set. Because if you go outside of your comfort zone in your skill area, you're stretching, you're pushing it a little bit. You're going to get better. You're going to stretch, you're going to grow. But if you're outside of your comfort zone and you're outside of your skill set, you're just a hot mess, right? Success never happens outside of your skill set. So what's the one thing that I can do right now, such that by doing it, everything else, it would just be easier. It's not perfect yet. It's just better than if I didn't do it, right? That's the kind of focusing question. And especially for someone who's got time constraints like you guys may, we have to be real clear. What am I going to do? Last thought, we've got to be accountable. What is accountability? I know what it sounded like to me. For years and years and years, accountability sounded like punishment. Because I screwed up a lot as a kid. And my dad used to say to me all the time, look, I'm going to hold you accountable for your actions. And so accountability got tied to punishment. But at the end of the day, accountability isn't punishment. It's just the ability to give an accounting for your activities, right? And here's what we know. Successful people are accountable people. Accountability drives results that others who don't have accountability only dream of. Here's the model for accountability. We've got to be clear on what's our goal. And tonight was all about how do we think about backing into how much money am I trying to create and why? Once we know what we're aiming for, we break it down into how many units, what am I trying to do, what's my goal, and then I got to do the key activities. And once I do the key activity, then I got to measure the results. Did doing this activity move the ball forward or did it not? Have a goal, do the key activities, measure the results, and then evaluate the process. You know, people talk all the time about how experience is the best teacher. Anybody hear that phrase, experience is the best teacher? I'm here to tell you that's a bunch of bunk. Experience is not the best teacher. Evaluated experience is the best teacher. Because there's lots and lots of people who have had experiences and they never stopped to learn and evaluate it, and they never grew out of it. There are plenty of people who have got 20 years of real estate experience, and you may know who some of those people are. And then there's other people that have 1 year of real estate experience, 20 years over, again and again and again. They never grow, they never learn, they never get any better. It's like Groundhog Day. Every day the alarm goes off, I hear Sonny and Cher sing, I'm about ready to have a breakdown, right? That's what happens if we don't evaluate our experience. The accountability model is set the goal, do the activity, measure the result, evaluate the process, then make an adjustment. Did I get where I needed to be? If not, what am I going to do differently so that I can recalibrate my goal and start the cycle all over again? And guys, the gap that causes this flywheel not to catch for most of us is the training gap. I have a goal, but I don't know what the right activities are. That's why we put this program into place in the evenings. That's why we have career builders, because we've got 24 topics that are going to get into what are the things that you need to learn to close that training gap so that you can make clear decisions about what am I going to do, such that by doing it, everything else moves the ball forward. It becomes easier. I can do the right activities. I can measure the result. I can evaluate the process. I can adjust and set a new goal. What we know is that people who've got goals, written goals, clear written goals, are 38% more likely to achieve them. That's a study from the Harvard Business Review. People who've got dreams and they want to achieve and they know in their head what they're looking for and they have a picture of it in their mind, guys, that's a daydream. If you don't take that picture and write down that goal in a quantifiable way that we're doing it here and to put it on paper, you do not have a goal. You have a dream. And I love dreams, but daydreams are not how you build a business. Taking that and putting it on paper, written goals will make you 38% more likely to achieve them. And an accountability partner on top of that will make you even more likely to achieve them. Harvard Business Review goes on to say the people with written goals and an accountability partner, someone who they have that conversation with, where you can say, this is what I intended to do. This is what I did do. Here's what got in the way. Here's the opportunities that I still have. Here's how I'm going to try to do it differently next time. And let's get together again in a week to have a conversation again. Someone with that kind of relationship, their ability to succeed goes up to 78% higher. Accountability is the secret sauce of all top performers, right? All top performers. So tonight was about helping you to think about how do I approach this goal setting? And think about how do I make sure that I'm aiming high enough. We go back to the story of the hunter and the wolf. I got to aim high enough. Why? Because there's a lot of things that are going to eat away my profits. I've got expenses to the market center, expenses to the franchise group, business overhead, taxes. I got to make sure that I aim high enough so that what I have left hits the target of the things that give me the meaningful life that I want for myself, which is the reason why I'm doing this in the first place. There's a question in chat that I'm going to get to in a second. But let me ask you this. What kinds of questions, ahas, or anything from tonight? What did you hear from tonight that's got you thinking? Any takeaways from tonight or things that you're going to do differently as a result of this conversation? I'd love for one or two people just to check. Who's got one?
I think you were muted for a little bit there.
I was there muted for a second. Okay, if I was, I'm going to ask you, what did you hear tonight that has you thinking differently? Is there anything you're going to do differently?
The habits create future. Like, stick to, same habit and which equals routine and have, a good mindset.
And the problem with that, Leslie, though, is that the most meaningful things in life, that the reward is way down the line. We've got to do it again and again and again. I've got to eat properly and exercise properly week after week after week in order to get the health that I want. I've got to communicate consistently the right way in relationships again and again and again before I have the marriage that I want. The payoff seems like it's so far down the line so many times that we've got to find a way to kind of buy in and doing it right now. How do we stay focused to what am I playing for, right? But it is habit. It's all habit. Any others? One more.
Well, I guess one thing that's got me thinking is I know you said that you were being conservative with the numbers, but I guess quantifying it the way that you did with 2.5% commission, having to sell $7.6 million worth of homes just to bring home $100,000.
Yeah. Right. And so you start to think about that. And the truth be told, in our commission model, Francis, you wouldn't have to be quite that much because you will cap at that point and then you'll keep 100% of the commission and you won't split it anymore. And that's where you start to catch that up quicker. But yeah, that's kind of keeping it real. You start to say, okay, look, if I made $100,000 in GCI, that ain't $100,000 to me. How many, if we cap in our model, that's about $5 million in sales to generate the $37,000 of company dollar where you get to keep 100% for yourself. And you're not at 100% profit at $100,000 profit at 5 million in sales. It's a little bit higher, right? And the reality of that is you start to say, okay, then I've got to do the math. How many units is that going to be? If it's $7 million or 7.5, if I sell $1 million houses, then I got to sell 7 or 8. If I sell $250,000, I got a much bigger number ahead of me. And it totally changes the way you think about approaching your business, right? All of that is important to think about. Now, there's a question that came up in chat, and if you guys have to jump off because it's after 7, go ahead. You won't hurt my feelings. But a question came up in chat about were we to form an LLC, would we be better off tax-wise? And here's what I'm going to tell you. I'm not a CPA. I'm not an attorney. I did not sleep in a Holiday Inn Express last night. So the advice that I'm going to give you is just my personal advice, my personal opinion. And I need you to get qualified advice on this because it's different for everyone. For the most part, when you're being taxed as an independent contractor, you're going to file your income and expenses on a Schedule C as part of your personal income. And it's going to just be part of your personal income tax filings. And you're going to be taxed at the rate of your personal income. And your personal income tax is probably the highest level of tax that exists out there. Businesses are taxed more favorably. And whether or not it makes sense for you to incorporate into a business structure is something that I do want you to have a conversation about. We spent a whole session on this on the Ignite class called Financial Basics for Agents or something. If you haven't taken Ignite, you can go into the YouTube channel, find the Ignite playlist, look for that course on financial basics, and we'll talk about this. My personal feeling is that LLCs are taxed more beneficially, and there are some tax savings to do that. The real reason for me is why I like to be an LLC, and every business that I've ever owned, I have incorporated as an LLC, and I've owned several. I have another business, a coaching and consulting company that's filed as an LLC. What happens when you file as an LLC is, in the worst case scenario, if you ever got sued, what they're suing is the business entity, not you, the individual. And the business entity is going to have the financial exposure to the value of the business. If you, God forbid, ever got sued, you do have errors and omissions insurance, which will be to protect you for errors and omissions. But if you ever made a mistake and it was in excess of what your insurance claims were, if you're not incorporated and you don't have that protective shield around you that an LLC or a corporation offers, then they're coming after your personal assets. And I mentioned before that when we're building a financial target, part of what we have to do is to be able to afford all the things that protect us, like health insurance, like disability insurance, like life insurance, all the things that could erode our estate. I'm going to tell you that if you got sued in a multi-million lawsuit and you're not an LLC, then they can come after your house and they can come after your kids' college fund and they can come after everything that you've worked so hard for. I like being an LLC just for that kind of protection, first and foremost. And then the tax benefits on top of that are secondary. I do think it's an important conversation that you need to have with your tax, with your CPA, but you want to make sure that you're getting counsel from somebody, whether it's attorney or a tax professional that has expertise with real estate small businesses. Because I have heard plenty of lawyers counsel an agent and say, you're a real estate agent, you're just going to file on a Schedule C. There's no point in incorporating. That's stupid. And I've had other people who specialize in this area that say, oh, no. There's lots of reasons why you might want to do that. Most agents do not. Your broker cannot pay an LLC. They can only pay you as an individual. The state of New Jersey prohibits a commission check to be shared with a corporation. So what happens is if you do become incorporated as an LLC, the commission check is going to be made payable in your name. But since you're the principal owner of that LLC, you have the ability to deposit that into your operating account. And it now becomes asset of the corporation and not asset of you, the individual. I think there's good reason to think about that. Go to your tax specialist and get good counsel on that. Any other questions that you have?
I know you're not the tax guy, you said, but since you've been doing this quite a while, if we do that, can we make that LLC a pass through and put that on our K1?
You know what? That's just an inch above my pay grade to give you knowledgeable advice on that, Francis. I don't know for sure. I don't know. You could be. You might be able to do that. For the most part, what most people that are LLC real estate agents, as I understand it, what they typically do is they don't file a K1. They do file they file their taxes still as part of their personal tax filings. However, the business taxes are taxed at a different rate. They're not taxed at the personal income level. They're taxed at the corporate level, and it's all filed up into a single tax return. Right.
Because I was also thinking that you would tie that and you'd want to be an LLC, which I looked into. And at first I was told I couldn't be, but then I looked on the New Jersey website and it says you can be.
You
but
can
like
be.
Said, it says you have to sign that acknowledgement saying that your company is eligible to be sued or whatever, or something to that effect.
Yeah. If you're an LLC, if you're, and you name your company, Francis Knock Real Estate LLC, whatever you want to call it, you can do that. Companies, Keller Williams is going to split the commission check and pay Francis Knock, the individual person. You just deposit that in as the principal owner of that LLC, and now it becomes an asset of the LLC. Right. Anyway, lots to think about there. We didn't even get into, well, there's a lot that I won't open up that can of worms right now. But I will say that is an important conversation that I want you to have. I do want you to not just earn whatever kinds of income creates the life that you want. I want you to be protected. I want you to earn enough to pay for good, competent legal advice, good, competent counsel from CPAs, earn enough to be able to have the right insurances, right? So that you can not lose all that you've worked so hard for, right? All right, here's where we're going tomorrow. Patty's going to be here tomorrow, and she's going to kind of take this now and take these big, hairy, audacious goals and start to operationalize that into how do we get down to the granular level? What specifically do I need to do and how much of it? We know what the model, have a goal, do the task, measure the outcome, evaluate it, make an adjustment, reset the goal. That's the model. Tomorrow, Patty's going to help you get into, let's start to think about a menu of things. What can I do? What should I do? How much of it? In order to get enough appointments. And at the end of the day, guys, all the activities that we do should be measured by how many qualified appointments do they lead to. Because at the end of the day, that's the most, hands down, the most important metric. Am I getting to a qualified listing appointment? Am I getting to a qualified buyer's consultation appointment? Because if I get to enough of those appointments, I'll take enough listings to close enough listings to generate the dollars. But nothing happens if I don't get to the appointment. So tomorrow, Patty's going to walk through with you some of the different tools and the models that we use to help you think about what does that mix look like? How do we prioritize what specific activities? And how do we keep track and measure what's working and what's not? That's where we're going tomorrow. And then next week, we start to get into some other things, some other topics.